Hello, I'm Darren Grimes and I'm here at ARC Conference with GB News. Now, I'm delighted to say that my guest right now is none other than the Right Honourable Tony Abbott, who, of course, was Australia's, I would say, most wonderful Prime Minister. But Tony, thank you very much for your time.
Darren, thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be here at this conference. And look, it's great that GB News is making so much of it.
Oh, absolutely. Now, what have you made so far? Because it's important stuff. Talking about actually telling a story about the West that is all too often, let's not forget, seek to destroy, denigrate, and actually do us down, is it not?
What you've had here for the last 3 days is 1,500 significant and influential people reminding everyone of the strengths and the value of Western civilization, and in the process try to consider the big issues and the big challenges we face so that all of us can go back to our normal lives, not just invigorated but more effective in trying to make a difference. The theme of this is a better story. Well, we have a very good story, but we do want to make it an even better one in the days, weeks, months, years, decades, centuries ahead, and everyone here is someone who can make a difference.
So what would you say then you would like the message that policymakers, lawmakers around the West actually hear from this, not just in Britain but elsewhere as well? Because I mean, there are plenty of people, Tony, as you might well be aware, that say the Conservative Party, certainly in Britain, isn't doing much in the way of conservatism.
We'll get to that in a minute if you like. But this is not just yet another gathering demanding that government do A, B and C or X, Y and Z. Frankly, far too often we look to government today to solve all our problems. This conference at heart is about more responsible citizens. It's actually about all of us looking within as well as looking without, try to ensure that we really are our best selves, because if I am my best self and you are your best self, well, then we will have the best possible impact on our families, on our neighbours, on our workmates, on our communities, and ultimately on our country too. Government is not the only solution. In the end, what's needed are stronger, more responsible, more active citizens, and that's frankly been at the heart of the message of this conference.
Do you think you can bring that about, that responsible citizenry that you talk about there, if we, I'm afraid to say, the very social fabric of many of our cities, for example, over recent weeks, seem to be tearing apart at the seams? There doesn't seem to be anything in the way of national unity in many nation states throughout the West now. Does that concern you, the sights that you see on the streets over the last, 3 weeks or so?
Look, of course it does. And so many Western capitals have been convulsed over the last 3 weeks by people protesting not against the atrocities done by Hamas terrorists in Israel, but against the reasonable and thus far it seems wholly proportionate response of Israel to this murderous existential assault. So I absolutely accept that we have a problem, that not enough of our citizens appreciate our history. Not enough of our citizens appreciate the deep inspirations on which our culture rests. Not enough of our citizenry is looking at the world through what I would regard as a rational, reasonable lens. I mean, we had the virus hysteria, we have the climate cult, we have the magic pudding economics, we have the gender fluidity push. Worst of all is the cultural self-loathing, which afflicts large parts of the West, particularly the Anglosphere, even though, for all our imperfections, we are still the best societies that humanity has ever seen, and we are less racist and more colourblind and more fair and more respectful of minorities than ever before.
So overnight, Tony, you were in the press. The established media are very angry with you because you said that net zero wasn't achievable by 2050. Now, of course, as you well know, Tony, that's something that we're signed up to as a nation here in Britain. Many other Western nations are looking at doing the same. What do you say to those who say, well, hang on a minute, Tony, because if you want to bring on the Greta Thunberg generation, you've got to get on board with this stuff?
Well, unfortunately, it's a pretty crazy world that follows a teenager who hasn't spent enough time at school, frankly. I mean, really and truly, if we are going to follow a guru, let's find a better guru than that. Now, one of our difficulties is that too many of our youngsters have had a propagandized education, which has been heavy on climate scares and light on history, light on the great books, light on an appreciation of all the things that have made our societies strong. What I said last night was that we cannot achieve net zero without impoverishing our societies. For instance, there's recently been a very thorough study of achieving net zero in Australia, but by very credible people, a team led by our former chief scientist, Robin Batterham, who's actually one of the participants at this conference. And the Batterham team said that achieving net zero would cost us $1.5 trillion in Australia by 2030.
Insane.
And upwards of $9 trillion by 2050. Now, given that Australia's annual GDP is about $2 trillion, we are going to have to sacrifice 1 year of our total production over the next 7 years just to make the limited progress towards net zero that the government is trying to make in that time. And we would sacrifice something like 5 years of our total production in order to get to net zero over the next 30 years. So these are massive hits on our well-being, and given that climate is by no means the only peril we face,
well,
it's not even the most serious peril we face. This, frankly, is not a rational way forward for our societies. You ask the people in Ukraine right now, what is the greatest challenge they face? They won't say climate. You ask the people in Israel, or indeed in Gaza, what is the great challenge they face? They're not going to say climate. You ask Taiwan, what is the biggest threat it faces? It's not going to say climate. Now, I have to say, one day, this whole climate fixation, this whole emissions obsession will be discredited. I just hope we don't have to suffer a great deal before then.
I couldn't agree with you more. But just finally, Tony, I wonder if you've got any reflections on actually, well, how on earth we sell this to a generation that, as you say, has been totally indoctrinated in the not just on the climate cult, but as you mentioned, the gender identity flummox, the whole there are over 100 genders and all the rest of it. Well, I tell you what, there's not over 100 ways to bankrupt a nation, are there?
What did Hemingway say? How do you go broke? First slowly and then suddenly. But look, in my country, we've had a number of elections where climate policy and energy have been the key issue in the campaign. And in every one of those elections, it's the climate skeptic party, the party that has put preserving cost of living and jobs ahead of reducing emissions. It's the skeptic party which has done best.
Yeah, well, wise words for policymakers to learn from. Tony Abbott, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks very much.